r/pettyrevenge, my boss called my parents to court, so I exposed his secrets. Hashtag chunk 1, the call that changed everything. I was in the middle of taking an order from table 7 when my mom called. Again. Hey, can you hold on 1 sec? I told the elderly couple, forcing a smile before ducking into the kitchen. My stomach was already doing backflips because mom never called during my shifts unless something was wrong. Hi, what's up? I answered, trying to keep my voice light. We need to talk about your work ethic, she said flatly. No greeting. No how are you. Just straight into it like I'd committed some cardinal sin. That's when I knew. Did Mr. Castellano call you? The words came out before I could stop them. There was a pause on the other end. Yes, actually. He's very concerned about your attitude and your dedication. He says you've been lazy, that you're not taking the job seriously, and... Mom, I worked a double shift yesterday. I covered for Tony when he called out sick on Saturday. I've never been late, not once, in 8 months. Well, Mr. Castellano says. I don't care what Mr. Castellano says. I heard my voice rising and forced myself to take a breath. Through the kitchen window, I could see him at the register, his back to me, probably scrolling through his phone while the dinner rush picked up. He's lying. Why would he even call you? Why would he do that? Mom's tone shifted from angry to defensive. Because he's looking out for you. He said you need a reality check, that your parents need to know you're not taking opportunities seriously. He was being helpful. That's when the rage really started to build, hot, sharp, and blinding. Helpful. Marcus Castellano was calling it helpful to phone my parents and trash talk me like I was a misbehaving teenager who needed parental intervention. I was 19 years old. I was in college. I was paying for half my tuition with money I made at his restaurant. And he was going behind my back like some tattletale aunt at Thanksgiving. I have to get back to work, I said quietly, and hung up before she could respond. The rest of my shift was a blur of forced smiles and mechanical movements. I kept catching sight of Castellano, his salt and pepper hair, his expensive watch, the way he'd started wearing cologne that was way too strong for someone his age. He'd owned Castellano's Italian kitchen for 15 years, ever since moving to the area with his wife, Diana. Apparently, he thought that gave him the right to be everybody's business. I'd worked there long enough to know things. Lots of things. I knew that he'd hired his girlfriend, a waitress named Jennifer who was barely older than me, specifically because he thought she was attractive. I knew about the inventory discrepancies that meant certain expensive bottles of wine went home with him instead of being sold. I knew because I'd seen the handwritten receipts he'd create to cover the difference, receipts that definitely didn't match the actual numbers in the system. I knew he'd had at least 3 affairs with employees over the past decade, and that Diana had no idea about any of them. I knew about the health violations that never made it to the health department because he paid off the inspector's sister's kids' tuition in cash every year. I knew about the taxes he wasn't paying, the employees he kept off the books, the unreported income he'd brag about to the other managers, thinking they'd keep quiet. I knew so much. The thing was, I hadn't cared about any of it before. It wasn't my business, wasn't my problem. I was just a college kid trying to earn money and get through my shift without dealing with drama. But the moment he'd crossed the line and called my parents, the moment he tried to paint me as some irresponsible kid who needed adult supervision, everything changed. When I got home that night, my dad was waiting for me in the living room. Not a good sign. Your mother said you were disrespectful on the phone, he said. No preamble, no asking how my day was. She didn't tell you what Mr. Castellano actually said to her. I asked. He said you're not pulling your weight at work. That you've got an attitude problem. That's a lie, Dad. A complete lie. I show up, I work hard, and I get excellent tips because customers like me. The only reason he's calling is because he's a controlling asshole who can't handle the fact that I don't bow and scrape for him. My dad's eyes narrowed. Watch your language. I'm 19 years old. The words came out louder than I intended. Why would my boss call my parents about my work performance instead of talking to me directly? Why would he do that unless he was trying to cause problems? Maybe because your attitude is exactly what he's talking about, my mom said from the doorway. She'd been listening. Of course she had. I looked between them, my parents, people I loved and respected, people who were supposed to be on my side, and I felt something inside me harden. They'd taken his word over mine. They'd judged me without even asking my perspective first. I'm going to bed, I said flatly. That night, I lay in my room and made a decision. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to let Marcus Castellano humiliate me, manipulate my parents, and face absolutely no consequences. He wanted to play dirty. He wanted to involve my family and my parents' trust. Then I was going to show him exactly what playing dirty looked like. I pulled out my laptop and started making a list of everything I knew. Every dirty detail. Every violation. Every secret affair. Every person he'd wronged or lied to. And I began planning exactly how I was going to destroy him. Hashtag chunk 2, the research rabbit hole. The list grew longer every day. I'd pull it up on my laptop late at night, after finishing homework and pretending everything was normal around my parents. Each item was a thread I could pull, and the more I pulled, the more the whole tapestry of Marcus Castellano's lies started to unravel. I started small, documenting everything I'd personally witnessed at work. The cash-only payments to the health inspector's sister. The wine bottles that disappeared from inventory. The way Jennifer would disappear into Castellano's office for staff meetings that lasted exactly 30 minutes, always right after the lunch rush ended. The pattern was obvious once you started looking for it. But knowing something and proving something are two very different things. That's when I realized how complicated this actually was. I couldn't just walk into the health department and say, my boss is corrupt, without evidence. Nobody was going to care. And as for the affairs, what did I actually have? Suspicions? Observations? That wasn't going to hold up to anything. I needed to be smarter about this. So I started researching. Late-night Google searches that started innocently enough, how to report tax evasion, health code violations reporting process, restaurant health inspector corruption, and spiraled into deeper rabbit holes. I found forums where people talked about taking down corrupt businesses. I read articles about tax fraud cases. I learned about whistleblower protections, though honestly, I didn't think I qualified as an official whistleblower since I wasn't exactly a formal employee with documented complaints. The problem was, the more I dug, the more I realized how messy this could get. If I reported Castellano to the IRS, they might investigate, but it would take months, maybe years. The health department could show up for an inspection, but he'd probably managed to hide most violations beforehand. He clearly had practiced doing it. And as for his wife, well, that was different. That was personal. That was nuclear. 3 days after the phone call incident, I went back to work. I had to. I couldn't let Castellano know I was suspicious of him, couldn't change my behavior or attitude. It had to be business as usual on the surface while underneath, I was systematically cataloging everything. "Hey, you're in a better mood," Tony said when I clocked in for the dinner shift. Tony was a line cook, probably 30, perpetually tired, and one of the few people at Castellano's who seemed genuinely decent. He'd also been one of Castellano's victims. I'd overheard a conversation between the managers about how Castellano had borrowed money from him 2 years ago that never got paid back. "Yeah, well," I said, keeping my tone light. "Decided to let some stuff go." "Good. Castellano's been in a mood all week. Snapped at me yesterday for nothing." That was useful information. Castellano was on edge about something. Maybe Diana was getting suspicious. Maybe one of his current affairs was going south. I filed it away. The shift was busy, which I was grateful for. It meant less time to think, less time for Castellano to approach me with fake concern or condescension. But near the end of the night, when I was wiping down a table, he did something that made my blood go cold. He texted my mom. I knew because my phone buzzed in my apron pocket, and when I pulled it out, I saw her message. "Mr. Castellano just texted me asking how you're doing at home. What is his problem?" I stared at that text for a full 30 seconds, trying to process. He wasn't just calling anymore. Now he was texting. He'd gotten my mom's phone number, probably from my employment paperwork, and he was actively reaching out to her like they were friends, like he had some legitimate reason to check in on my family life. That was different. That was a new level of invasive. That was also, I realized with a cold clarity, something I could potentially use. Unwanted contact with a minor's family member. That was harassment territory. That was documentation I could keep. I texted her back, "Screenshot that. Keep all his messages." My hands were shaking as I finished my shift. On the drive home, I started thinking bigger picture. Castellano was clearly someone who operated without boundaries. He didn't think the normal rules applied to him. Calling parents, texting mothers, hiring people based on attraction, hiding money, paying off inspectors, it all pointed to someone who believed he was untouchable. People like that always had weaknesses though. They always thought they were smarter than everyone else, which meant they got sloppy. I needed to find where he was getting sloppy. Over the next week, I shifted my observation tactics. Instead of just noting suspicious behavior, I started paying attention to Castellano's schedule, his habits, his routines. He'd take calls in his office with the door locked, romantic calls, I suspected, based on his tone. He'd leave the restaurant on certain afternoons and come back 2 hours later with his shirt untucked and his tie loosened. He kept a drawer in his desk that he always locked when he left. I'd seen him do it 100 times. And there was something else. Something that had been bugging me since I'd first decided to do this. His wife. Diana Castellano sometimes came into the restaurant, usually on weekends. She was probably 50, blonde, dressed way too expensively for a casual family restaurant. She always looked tired. Not the good kind of tired, like after a long day of honest work. The tired that comes from knowing something's wrong but not being sure what, or being afraid to ask. I'd felt a twinge of guilt about that until I realized something. Diana deserved to know. Not just because it would hurt Castellano, but because she deserved better than a husband who was making her look like a fool. If I were in her position, I'd want to know the truth. But I still didn't have concrete proof of anything. I had observations, suspicions, and a growing collection of notes on my laptop that were interesting but ultimately not actionable. I needed to think like someone who knew how to actually investigate things. That's when I made the decision that changed everything. I was going to need help. Real help. Not anonymous forum posts or generic Google searches. I was going to need to talk to someone who actually knew about this stuff. Someone who wouldn't judge me for what I was considering. The problem was, I had no idea who that person was or how to find them without getting caught. And then, completely by accident, I found out that Jennifer, the girlfriend waitress, had started dating one of the line cooks, Marco. Publicly dating him. There were pictures on her Instagram from 2 days ago at the movies together. Which meant she was done with Castellano. Which meant she might be willing to talk. #Chunk3, the unexpected ally. I spent 3 days working up the courage to talk to Jennifer. 3 days of watching her laugh with Marco during shift changes, seeing the way she'd light up when he texted her, noticing how she seemed lighter somehow, like she'd finally put down something heavy she'd been carrying. I almost felt bad for what I was about to do. Almost. The opportunity came on a Wednesday afternoon when the restaurant was between lunch and dinner service. Jennifer was doing inventory in the storage room, and I made a point of needing to grab supplies. When I slipped inside and closed the door behind me, she looked up from her clipboard with mild confusion. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice low even though we were alone. "We need to talk. About Castellano." Her entire body went rigid. For a second, I thought she might deny everything, blow me off, act like she didn't know what I was talking about. But something in my expression must have told her I wasn't fishing. I already knew. The clipboard lowered slowly to her side. "What about him?" she asked carefully. "I know what happened between you two. I'm not here to judge you or tell anyone." I paused, testing the waters. "I'm here because I need information, and I think you might be willing to give it to me." Jennifer's face went through several emotions in quick succession: fear, anger, shame, and finally something that looked like relief. She set the clipboard down on a stack of boxes and leaned against the shelves, crossing her arms. Look, that's done, she said quietly. I'm not interested in. He called my parents, I interrupted. Complained about me to my mom. Made me look like a problem employee to my family. And now he's texting my mom directly. I want to stop him, and I think you can help me. Jennifer's expression shifted. Some of the defensiveness melted away, replaced by something that might have been understanding. Or maybe she was just tired of carrying her own secrets. What do you want to know? She asked. I lowered my voice even more. Everything. How it started. How long it lasted. Did he ever promise you anything? Did he ever mention money stuff, business stuff, anything about inspectors or deals? She laughed, a short, bitter sound. God, where do I even start? She rubbed her face. It started about 4 months ago. He told me I was special, that he saw potential in me, all that bullshit. He said he could help my career, that I could become a manager, that he'd take care of me. Meanwhile, he was doing the same thing to at least 2 other girls that I know of. My jaw clenched. Did he ever give you money? Not directly. But he'd forget to charge me for meals, comp my shifts, make sure I got the best tables. And there were gifts, a bracelet, some cash that he said was a bonus, but it was always supposed to be secret. Always supposed to be just between us. She shook her head. I was stupid. I was 19, and he made me feel important. So Jennifer had been 19 too. Castellano had a type, apparently. Did he ever talk about the business? About money, about inspectors, about anything illegal? She was quiet for a moment, thinking. There were things I overheard. I was in his office once, and he was on the phone with someone. He was talking about keeping things off the books and something about the health inspector's sister. He made a joke about it, said something like, best investment I ever made. At the time, I didn't really understand what he meant. This was gold. This was actual information. Would you be willing to write that down? Document what you remember. Jennifer's eyes widened. What? No. Absolutely not. I'm not getting involved in whatever this is. I'm done with him, I'm moving on, and I'm not looking back. He's still doing this, I said, pushing harder than I probably should have. Right now, there's another girl. And he's calling people's parents. That's not my problem. Her voice was sharp. I get what you're going through, I really do, but I'm not sabotaging my life because of his. I need this job. I need the money for college. And if Castellano figures out I'm talking to you, he'll fire me, and then he'll make sure nobody else hires me either. He's done it before. The fear in her voice was real. I understood it. But it also made me realize something important. Castellano had leverage over a lot of people. That was exactly the kind of power structure I needed to dismantle. Okay, I said quietly. Okay, I'm not asking you to write anything down. I'm just asking you to keep your eyes open. If you see something, anything, just let me know. You don't have to do anything with the information. I will. She studied my face for a long moment. You're actually going to try to take him down, aren't you? I don't know yet, I admitted. But I'm going to try something. Jennifer picked her clipboard back up, but her hands were shaking slightly. If you do this, be careful. He's a coward when it comes to direct confrontation, but he's dangerous when he feels threatened. And he has money. Money means lawyers and connections and ways to make people's lives difficult. I'll be careful. She moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I hope you nail him. But don't do it for me. I'm not worth risking your future over. She left before I could respond. I stood alone in the storage room, her words echoing in my head. Don't do it for me. But that wasn't entirely true anymore, was it? This had started as something personal, Castellano humiliating me in front of my parents. But somewhere along the way, it had become bigger than that. Jennifer's silence. Tony's unpaid debt. The health inspector's sister. The pattern of manipulation and abuse that Castellano had built his entire operation on. I pulled out my phone and texted my mom, keep documenting everything he sends. Every text, every email. Screenshot it all. She replied within seconds, what's going on? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I actually had a plan. That night, I opened my laptop and created a new folder. Not just a list anymore, I created actual documents. One for Castellano's behavior toward employees. One for suspected financial crimes. One for his wife's contact information, which I had found through a simple Google search of their property records. One for the local health department, with all their procedures and contact information clearly laid out. I was building an actual case now. A real one. The only problem was, I still didn't know if I had the guts to actually use it. Hashtag chunk 4, the complication. The universe has a twisted sense of timing. I'd been planning, organizing, documenting everything meticulously for exactly 5 days when Castellano called me into his office. My first instinct was panic. Had Jennifer told him something? Had he figured out I was building a case against him? I ran through every interaction of the past week, trying to find the moment where I'd slipped up, where I'd given myself away. Close the door, Castellano said when I entered. He was sitting behind his desk, which was messier than usual, papers everywhere, an empty coffee cup with lipstick stains that definitely weren't from his wife. I closed the door and stood there, trying to keep my expression neutral. My heart was hammering in my chest. Sit down, he said. I sat. I've been hearing some interesting rumors, he continued, leaning back in his chair. About you asking questions. About you being very interested in how I run my business. Okay. This was it. He knew. I'd miscalculated somehow, and now. Jennifer came to me today, he said. Voluntarily. Very concerned about you. Said you were interrogating her about our past relationship, asking her about things you had no business knowing about. Relief flooded through me, quickly followed by a surge of anger. Jennifer had lied. She'd gone straight to him and pretended to be loyal. Of course she had. She was protecting herself, just like she'd said she would. I wasn't, I started. I don't care what you were doing, he interrupted. What I care about is that you're creating drama in my workplace. That's not professional. That's not respectful of the business that's giving you a paycheck. He stood up and walked around to the front of the desk, leaning against it with his arms crossed. He was trying to look authoritative, but there was something else in his expression too. Uncertainty. Maybe even worry. Here's what's going to happen, he said. You're going to stop whatever little investigation you think you're running. You're going to stop talking to my employees about my personal business. And you're going to remember that I've been nothing but generous to you despite your obvious attitude problem. My attitude problem? I couldn't help it. The words just came out. You called my parents. You told them I was. I called your parents because I was concerned about your work ethic. Because you've been late multiple times, because you forget orders, because you're distracted and unprofessional. That's my job as a manager. No, it's not. Your job is to manage the restaurant, not to. Careful, he said, his voice dropping to something colder. You're standing on very thin ice right now. And I'd hate to see you slip and fall. That was a threat. A clear one. And it made something crystallize in me, a sharp, certain knowledge that I'd been right about all of this. Castellano was dangerous precisely because he believed he had the right to control everything and everyone around him. He'd threatened me without even blinking. I think I should go back to work, I said. I think you should think very carefully about what you do next, he replied. Because if you keep making trouble, if you keep stirring up drama with my employees, I will have no choice but to let you go. And I'll make sure everyone in the restaurant industry in this city knows exactly why. Do you understand me? I understood him perfectly. He was telling me that if I didn't back off, he'd destroy my chances of getting another job. He was telling me he could end my financial independence before it even started. I nodded and left his office before I could say something I'd regret. The rest of my shift was torture. Every time Castellano looked at me, every time he walked through the dining room, I felt that threat hanging over my head like an axe. And what made it worse was the realization that he'd just confirmed everything I'd suspected about him. The casual way he wielded power. The threats. The absolute certainty that he could control me if he just showed me how much damage he could do. After my shift, I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, just breathing. My hands were shaking. Part of me wanted to pack it in, to delete all my documents, stop asking questions, just keep my head down and get through the rest of college without any more drama. But another part of me, a bigger part, was angrier than I'd ever been. I called my parents that night. It was the first time I'd really talked to them since the whole situation had started, and I needed to know where I stood with them. Hey, my mom answered on the second ring. She sounded cautious, like she wasn't sure what kind of conversation we were about to have. Can you put me on speaker? I asked. I need to talk to both of you. There was a pause, then my dad's voice came through. We're here. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, I said. I need to tell you some things about my boss. And I need you to listen with an open mind before you react. So I told them. Not everything, not yet, but enough. I told them about Jennifer, about the way Castellano had been manipulating employees, about the threats he'd just made to me today. And most importantly, I told them about the calling them in the first place, about using them as leverage to control me. He told us you were having performance issues, my mom said quietly. I know. That's not true. Or it's not the whole truth. And even if it were, that's not how a manager handles it. You don't go behind an employee's back and call their parents. You definitely don't do it to someone who's 19 years old and trying to become independent. Why didn't you tell us this before, my dad asked. Because I was embarrassed. Because I thought maybe you'd believe him, and it would look like I was the problem. We should have asked you, my mom said, and I could hear the guilt in her voice. We should have talked to you instead of just believing what he said. Well, I'm telling you now. And I need you to know what I'm about to do might get messy. It might cause some complications. But I can't let him keep doing this to people. I didn't tell them exactly what I was planning. I couldn't. But I needed them on my side, and more importantly, I needed them to understand that I wasn't going to back down just because Castellano had threatened me. We're listening, my dad said. Whatever you need. That night, I opened my laptop again. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady. I had a plan forming in my head, not fully developed yet, but there. A way to take everything I'd documented and turn it into something real. But there was one problem I hadn't solved yet, how to prove any of it without implicating Jennifer or putting her in danger. Chunk 5, the complication deepens. The problem with having a plan is that it requires actual evidence. Real, documented, undeniable proof that can't be explained away or dismissed as the vindictive complaints of a disgruntled employee. And that's when I realized that everything I'd been collecting over the past week, the conversations with Jennifer, the fragmentary stories from other employees, the general atmosphere of fear and control, wasn't actually evidence at all. It was gossip. It was hearsay. It was exactly the kind of thing a good lawyer could shred in minutes. I spent most of Thursday night researching what I'd need. Tax evasion requires financial records. Health code violations require documentation or inspection reports. Affairs with employees require, what? A witness statement that could destroy someone's career. An admission. I was starting to realize why people get away with this kind of thing for so long. It's not that nobody knows. It's that knowing and proving are two completely different animals. I was sitting in my apartment, a small studio I shared with my roommate Maya, staring at my laptop at 2 a.m. when she came home from her shift at the bookstore. You're still up, she asked, dropping her bag by the door. And you look like you're plotting someone's murder. Should I be concerned? Maya was one of those people who could read me instantly, which was both helpful and annoying. We'd been roommates for only 2 months, but she'd already figured out that I didn't handle stress well and that I had a tendency to spiral into research rabbit holes. Not murder, I said. But I'm working on something. Something illegal. No, I said. Something justified. She came over and looked at my screen, which was displaying a page about filing complaints with the Department of Health and Human Services. Oh my god, this is about your boss, isn't it? The guy who called your parents. I nodded. And you're trying to. She gestured vaguely at the screen. What? Report him. I'm trying to figure out how, I admitted. I know he's doing illegal things. I know he's hurting people. But I don't know how to prove it in a way that matters. Maya pulled up a chair and sat down. Okay, so there's a difference between knowing something and having evidence. That's obvious. But have you thought about what you actually want to happen? Like, is the goal to get him fired? To get the restaurant shut down? To get him arrested? It was a good question, and one I should have asked myself before I started down this path. I want him to stop, I said slowly. I want him to stop calling my parents, stop threatening me, stop manipulating his employees. And I want him to understand that he can't do that to people. Okay, Maya said. So consequences. You want him to face consequences? Yeah. Real ones. Then here's the thing, she said, and her voice took on that tone she used when she was about to say something practical and slightly harsh. You need to figure out what evidence actually exists that you can legally obtain. You can't break into his office and steal files. You can't hack his computer. You have to do this the right way, or it blows up in your face and he's the victim instead of the villain. She was right. Of course she was right. And it made the whole thing feel even more impossible. Friday was worse. I went into work trying to act normal, but everything felt different. Castellano kept watching me, not obviously, but I caught him looking at me from across the dining room, his expression unreadable. Jennifer actively avoided me, which I took as confirmation that she really had gone back and reported everything to him. And the other employees seemed nervous around me, like word had somehow gotten around that I was the one causing trouble. Around 7 p.m., during the dinner rush, Tommy, one of the other servers who'd seemed sympathetic when I'd asked him casual questions, pulled me aside in the kitchen. You should probably know, he said quietly, Castellano told us today that there were going to be some staffing changes coming up. Performance reviews. He was very specific about how he's looking for reliability and discretion. He's planning to fire me, I said, and it wasn't even a question. I think so, Tommy said. And I think he's doing it now because he's nervous about something. He's usually pretty chill, but the past couple days he's been different. Aggressive. Did he say anything specific? Just that some people have been asking inappropriate questions about his personal business, and that's not going to be tolerated. I figured he was talking about you. After my shift, I sat in my car again, it was becoming a ritual, and called my parents. This time I got straight to the point. I think my boss is about to fire me, I said. What? Why? My mom asked. Because I've been asking questions about his business practices, and he's scared. Which means I'm on the right track. But it also means I need to move faster. How much faster? My dad asked. What exactly are you planning to do? I'm going to file complaints, I said. With the health department, with the IRS, with the labor board. But I need documentation, and I'm going to need to be smart about how I gather it. That could be dangerous, my dad said. If he's threatened you once. He's not going to do anything to me physically. That's not his style. But he will try to destroy my reputation in the industry if I give him the chance. So I need to be careful, but I also can't wait around. There was a long silence. What do you need from us? My mom finally asked. I need you to know that if he fires me, it's because he's scared. It's not because I did anything wrong. And I need you to support me when this gets public. Because it's going to get public, and it's probably going to be messy. We're with you, my dad said. But honey, please don't do anything illegal. We can't help you if you break the law. I won't, I promised. I'll do this the right way. But even as I said it, I was already thinking about the ways that the right way might not be enough. And I was thinking about Jennifer, and wondering if there was any way to protect her from what was coming while still making sure everyone knew the truth about what Castellano had done. The next morning, I received a text from an unknown number, *we need to talk. Not at work. J*. Jennifer wanted to meet. And whatever she wanted to tell me, I had a feeling it was going to change everything. #chunk6, the double-edged sword. I stared at the text for a full minute before responding. My first instinct was to ignore it. Jennifer had already proven she couldn't be trusted, she'd run straight to Castellano the moment I'd confided in her. Whatever she wanted to tell me now could be a trap, a setup to catch me saying something incriminating that he could use against me. But my second instinct, the one that won out, was curiosity. If she was reaching out secretly, with an unknown number, there had to be a reason. * coffee place on Morrison Street. 11 a.m., *, I texted back. * yes. Please come alone, *. The coffee shop was neutral territory, a small indie place about halfway between my apartment and the restaurant. I got there 15 minutes early and ordered a drink I didn't want, claiming the corner table and positioning myself so I could see the door. My hands felt shaky as I wrapped them around the warm cup. This was stupid. This was probably a trap. But it was also potentially the break I'd been waiting for. Jennifer arrived exactly at 11, and she looked worse than she had on Wednesday. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore a hoodie despite the warm weather, like she was trying to make herself invisible. She ordered nothing and sat down across from me without preamble. He knows, she said immediately. He knows I talked to you. I figured that out, I said carefully. That's why you've been avoiding me. No, I mean, he knows I talked to you about everything. The money stuff, the girls, the inspections he pays off. All of it. She glanced around nervously. I don't know how. But Wednesday night, after I left your place, he called me. He wanted to know where I'd been. I lied, but he didn't believe me. He said some people were asking questions they shouldn't ask, and he wanted to know if I was one of them. My stomach dropped. What did you tell him? Nothing. I said no, of course not. But he didn't believe me. And then yesterday. She trailed off, her eyes filling with tears. Yesterday he showed me bank records. My bank records. He wanted to know why I deposited cash payments into my account if I'd been telling him I wasn't earning tips because I only work part of the week. Jennifer. Let me finish, she said, her voice shaking. He said he pays close attention to his employees. That he knows everything about all of us. And then he told me that if I ever discussed his personal affairs or his business with anyone outside the restaurant again, he would report me to the IRS for not declaring my tips as income. He said he had documentation. He said it could cost me thousands in back taxes and penalties. I felt something cold settle in my chest. He's blackmailing you. Yes, Jennifer whispered. But here's the thing, and this is why I'm here, risking this conversation. I don't think he actually has documentation. I think he's bluffing. Because if he really reported me, he'd have to admit that he knows I'm earning tips, which means he'd have to explain why he's not paying proper minimum wage. It would open up all his books for scrutiny. So he's using the threat. To keep me quiet, Jennifer said. Just like he's probably using threats against other people too. But here's what I realized this morning, if he's that scared of you asking questions, if he's already threatening me, then you've got more on him than you think. Because a confident person doesn't panic and start threatening people. A guilty person does. I wanted to believe her. Part of me did believe her. But another part of me was acutely aware that she could still be working with Castellano, that this could be an elaborate setup to see what I actually knew and didn't know. Still, I had to take a chance. Why did you really reach out? Jennifer took a breath. Because I'm angry. Because what he did to me is exactly what he did to you, he's using fear and threats to control people. And because I think. She hesitated. I think I can help you. But I need you to understand what you'd be asking me to do. If I help you, if I actually cooperate with authorities or give statements or anything like that, he can make my life very difficult. Tax troubles, legal troubles, industry trouble. I could end up blacklisted. I know, I said quietly. But I also know that I can't live in fear of him forever. And I can't be the person who stays silent while he hurts other people. She leaned forward. So here's what I'm offering, access. I have access to things. The cash register records, the scheduling system, the supplier invoices. I've been his office manager for 3 years. He doesn't even think of me as a threat because I'm just the girl who does the boring paperwork. But the paperwork is everything. It's all there. Jennifer, if he finds out. He won't, she said with a certainty I almost believed. Not if we're smart. I can copy things slowly. A couple pages at a time. I can photograph documents with my phone. I can give you access to the password for his email account. Yes, he's dumb enough to have written it down, and yes, I've seen it. I should have said no. I should have told her to stop right there, that accessing his email would be illegal, that I couldn't ask her to do that. But I was also thinking about what Maya had said about needing evidence, about the impossibility of proving anything without documentation. And I was thinking about Castellano calling my parents, about the way he'd humiliated me, about Jennifer herself shaking across a table from me. If you do this, I said slowly, you need to understand that it has to lead somewhere. This can't be a half measure where we gather evidence and then I decide not to use it. Once you start helping me, we have to see it through to the end. I know, Jennifer said. And I'm okay with that. Even if it destroys your career in this industry. Even then, she said. Because I don't want to work in an industry where people like him get to win. And I don't want to be someone who stays quiet when she could have done something. After she left, 20 minutes later, having told me to give her until Monday to start gathering materials, I sat alone with my cold coffee and tried to process what had just happened. I'd just been handed the keys to Castellano's entire operation. I had access to documents, emails, financial records. Everything I'd been struggling to find was suddenly within reach. But I also had a partner now, someone whose life and career could be destroyed if I made a wrong move. And that changed everything. The stakes had just become real in a way they hadn't been before. My phone buzzed. It was my boss, * performance review. Monday 4 p.m. Don't be late, *. He was moving faster than I'd expected. The timeline was collapsing, shrinking down to just a few days. I had until Monday to figure out what to do with what Jennifer was about to give me. And I had no idea if I was ready. #Chunk7. The performance review was a trap, and we both knew it. I spent most of Saturday and Sunday in a state of controlled panic that probably looked like normal weekend behavior to anyone watching, but felt like living inside a pressure cooker from the inside. My parents called twice, once to ask if I wanted to come home for dinner, once to check on whether I was staying out of trouble. The second call made my stomach hurt. They still didn't fully trust me. Castellano had done that. He'd poisoned the well of their faith in me with his phone calls and complaints, and even though they were trying to move past it, there was a hairline fracture in our relationship that hadn't quite healed. I almost told them everything on Sunday night. I was lying in my apartment, staring at my ceiling, thinking about how the secret I was keeping was becoming heavier every hour. But then I imagined trying to explain it, not just the revenge plan, but the fact that I was about to help someone access their employer's private email account, which was objectively illegal, which could get both Jennifer and me charged with crimes. I imagined my parents' faces shifting from confusion to disappointment to something worse. So I didn't tell them. Instead, I texted Jennifer on Sunday afternoon, any updates? She responded 20 minutes later, * he's been in his office all day going through files. I think he's paranoid. Destroying things maybe. You need to hurry, *. That message sent a jolt of adrenaline through my system. He was panicking. He was destroying evidence. The window was closing faster than I'd anticipated, and I still didn't have a concrete plan for what to do with whatever Jennifer managed to get me. I'd been so focused on gathering ammunition that I hadn't thought enough about the actual firing. I called Maya on Sunday night. We hadn't talked much since the day she'd outlined all my potential legal problems, but I needed her head. She agreed to meet me at a coffee shop near her apartment, which meant I spent the drive over rehearsing what I could and couldn't say without directly admitting to crimes in progress. You look like you're about to commit a felony, were her first words when she sat down across from me. That's one way to describe Monday, I said. She closed her eyes for a second, pinching the bridge of her nose. Please tell me you're not doing what I think you're doing. I need to know something, I said instead. Hypothetically. If someone came to you with documentation of a company's tax evasion, health code violations, and proof of wage theft, where would that documentation need to come from for it to be usable? You mean, would it matter if it was obtained illegally? Maya's voice was quiet but sharp. Would it? Yes. Actually, yes, very much. If someone broke into his office and took files, that's breaking and entering, that's theft, that's probably computer fraud if we're talking about emails. Even if the documentation proves he's guilty of 100 crimes, if it was obtained through illegal means, none of it becomes admissible. It becomes evidence of your crimes instead. She leaned back in her chair. Tell me you're not helping someone break into his computer. I'm not helping someone break into anything, I said, which was technically true. Jennifer was the one doing it. I was just receiving the fruits of her breaking and entering. Maya didn't look satisfied with this answer, but she also didn't push it. Instead, she asked, what about his wife? And the authorities? What about them? If you go to his wife with proof of his affairs, you're potentially involved in intentional infliction of emotional distress, depending on how you do it. And if the documents you give to authorities are obtained illegally, they might not be able to use them for an investigation, but they also might be required to report that you obtained them illegally, which means you're admitting to a crime. She took a breath. I'm telling you this because you're my friend and I'm worried about you. The revenge fantasy feels good. The actual legal execution of revenge is a lot more complicated and a lot more likely to damage your own life. So what am I supposed to do? I asked. Just, let him get away with it. Let him keep calling my parents. Keep threatening people like Jennifer. I'm not saying that, Maya said. I'm saying that you need to talk to a lawyer. An actual lawyer, not me, because I'm not a lawyer and you're making me an accessory after the fact by telling me this stuff. I'm saying that if you have legitimate concerns about a business violating health codes or labor laws, there are legitimate ways to report that. You can go to the health department anonymously. You can call the labor board. You can. But then it's just my word against his, I said. He's the owner. He's established. He's got money for lawyers. I'm a 19-year-old part-time employee. Without actual evidence, it's just a disgruntled worker making complaints. Maybe, Maya said. But at least you wouldn't be committing federal crimes while you're doing it. We went back and forth like this for another hour, with Maya getting progressively more stressed and me getting progressively more defensive. By the time I left, we'd reached a compromise of sorts. She wouldn't actively help me with anything illegal, but she also wouldn't report me. And if the moment came where I needed legal defense, she'd help me find someone who could provide it. It wasn't a resounding endorsement, but it was better than nothing. Monday arrived with the kind of mundane inevitability of a guillotine. I went to my classes in a daze, took notes I didn't retain, and by 3:45 p.m., I was standing outside Castellano's restaurant trying to psyche myself up to go inside. The performance review was supposed to start at 4 p.m. At 3:58, my phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer, sent from her personal number, * he fired me. 20 minutes ago. Said I wasn't a good fit anymore, *. My blood went cold. He'd fired her. Which meant she'd lost access. Which meant all those files, all those documents she was planning to photograph, all the passwords and invoices and evidence, it all just evaporated. I called her number immediately. She picked up on the first ring. I couldn't get anything, she said, her voice shaking with either anger or tears or both. I barely made it 2 hours before he called me in and said I was done. I think he was testing me Friday, seeing if I'd crack under pressure. And when I didn't immediately confess to talking to you, he decided I was a liability anyway. Jennifer, I'm so sorry. Don't apologize, she said. Just promise me this wasn't for nothing. Promise me you're still going to do something with this, because if he just gets away with it completely, if I lost my job for nothing, her voice broke. I promise, I said, and meant it with an intensity that scared me a little. Because now I had no evidence, no documentation, no Jennifer on the inside. I had only myself, my knowledge, and approximately 4 minutes before a performance review that suddenly felt like it could go any direction at all. I took a breath and pushed through the restaurant door. #Chunk8. The performance review room was smaller than I remembered. Castellano sat behind his desk with his hands folded, and for the first time, I could see the cracks in his armor. His jaw was clenched. There were dark circles under his eyes. The man looked like he hadn't slept since Friday. Come in, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Close the door. I did, and the sound of it shutting felt like a cage door locking. I wanted to talk to you about your performance here, he began, pulling out a piece of paper. You've been with us for 6 months now, and while you're generally competent, there have been some concerns. Issues with punctuality, with attitude, with what? I interrupted, my voice steadier than I felt. With the fact that you've been calling my parents behind my back. With the fact that you're upset I won't let you control every aspect of my life. Castellano's face darkened. I don't know what you're talking about. You called them 3 times. You told them I was unreliable, that I was heading down a bad path, that they needed to keep closer tabs on me. You treated me like I'm a child instead of an adult, and then when I didn't immediately collapse under that pressure, you decided I was too much trouble. That's not, he started, but I kept going. I know what you've been doing here, I said. I know about the health code violations. The unreported tips. The employees you've been pressuring into situations they're not comfortable with. I know you've been skimming from the register and filing false expense reports with the IRS. I didn't have documentation. I didn't have evidence. But I had something better. I had watched his face closely enough over 6 months to know which accusations hit home. His eye twitched when I mentioned the IRS. His fingers clenched when I said, unreported tips. I also know you've been calling Jennifer, I continued, pressuring her to keep quiet about things she's seen, and when you realized she might not be completely loyal to you, you fired her this afternoon to tie up loose ends. You need to leave, Castellano said quietly, standing up from his desk. You're fired. Effective immediately. I'm not done, I said, and I stood too. I came here today to tell you that I'm going to the health department tomorrow morning. I'm going to file a formal complaint about the conditions here, about the violations I've observed. I'm going to call the labor board about wage theft. And I'm going to send your wife a very detailed email about your relationship with at least 3 employees, with dates and times and locations. I watched his face go white. You don't have any, he started. I have my own eyes, I said. I have my own memory. I have 6 months of observations. And I have Jennifer, who is very willing to file her own complaints with the labor board since you just terminated her without cause after she refused to participate in illegal activity. The thing about bluffing is that it only works if you commit completely. So I turned around and walked toward the door. My hand was on the doorknob when he spoke. Wait. I didn't turn around, but I didn't leave either. What do you want? His voice was small now, deflated. I turned back slowly. I want you to never contact my parents again. I want you to write Jennifer a letter of recommendation and pay her 2 weeks severance. And I want you to know that every single thing I said about going to the authorities, I meant. That's not a threat. That's a promise. If you do this, he said, you're destroying my business. My marriage. Everything. You did that yourself, I replied. I'm just making sure you face actual consequences for it. The way you should have all along. I didn't wait for his response. I walked out of that office, through the restaurant, and into the cool evening air. My hands were shaking, my heart was pounding, but I'd done it. I'd looked him in the eye and told him exactly what was going to happen. The health department inspection happened on Wednesday. The inspector found 17 violations, ranging from improper food storage to faulty hand-washing stations. He issued a citation and a mandatory fine. The local news picked it up because it was a slow news day, popular local restaurants cited for health code violations, and suddenly, Castellano's reputation, which he'd worked years to build, started cracking in public. I filed a complaint with the labor board on Thursday. The labor board's investigation took 3 weeks, but they found evidence of systematic wage theft going back at least 2 years. There would be fines. There would be back pay owed to multiple employees. The email to his wife happened on Friday. I wrote it carefully, factually, with no emotional language. Just, here are the things I observed. Here are the dates. Here are the people. I sent it from a burner email address so it couldn't be traced directly to me. I didn't follow up with any of those situations. I didn't need to. The machinery of consequence, once set in motion, had its own momentum. What I did do was go home the following Sunday for dinner. My mom made lasagna. My dad opened a bottle of wine. And while we were eating, my mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. We got a letter from your boss, she said. Apologizing for the calls. He said he'd been dealing with some personal issues and he handled them poorly. He wanted us to know that you've been a reliable, good employee and that he regretted the way things ended. I didn't tell them what I'd done. I didn't need to. They could read between the lines themselves, something had changed. Something had shifted. And maybe they didn't know exactly what I'd done, but they could see the result. Their kid had stood up for themselves. Their kid had solved their own problem. That's good to hear, I said, squeezing her hand back. The hairline fracture in our relationship had finally healed. 3 months later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Castellano had sold the restaurant. His wife had left him. He was working at a different restaurant now, in a different town, in a different position. Not in charge of anything anymore. Just a guy doing prep work, no authority, no power over anyone. I felt no satisfaction when I heard this. What I felt was something simpler, relief. The weight that had been sitting on my chest since the day he first called my parents had finally lifted. Revenge, it turned out, didn't look like triumph. It looked like reclaiming your own life. It looked like standing in your own power and using it. It looked like walking away from something toxic and watching it poison itself without your help. And sometimes, that was enough.